Hey everybody, good morning. It is day 118 of spiritual healthcare. So welcome all of you, and it is good to see you guys. It is a kind of a windy but nice day here in Edmonton. I hope you guys are doing really well. I hope you had a great week. I had a crazy week in Toronto filming and just having a lot of fun and whatever. So I'm glad to see you guys, and it's going to be a really good class today. I've been doing lots of really fascinating learning actually over the last little while on a bunch of different subjects, and I can't wait to share it with you guys. So good morning to all of you. It is, as I say, day 118. It's crazy. It was good to see everybody back when, or last week when I was still in Toronto. Good morning, Shadow. Good morning, everybody. Raining there. Yeah, it's finally raining there. You guys never get rain. I know we don't get a lot of rain either because we're prairie as well. So we don't get a lot of rain either. But yeah. So last week in Toronto was crazy windy as well. You guys could probably hear it on the speaker, but. It was a fun week. Got lots shot, got lots filmed. It was a very tiring week, but it happened, and the series is going to be fantastic. You guys are going to be so excited for season 3. I'm telling you. Good morning to Lori. Nice to see you. Good morning, guys. And it's. Yeah, the season 3 for Haunted Hospitals, you guys are going to get such a kick out of because some of the cases I think are so extreme, but they also bring up a lot of really interesting questions in regards to the pandemic and all sorts of things. So this season is unlike any other season that we've filmed. Which is kind of cool. So good morning, Janae. Nice to see you. Good morning, guys. It is a beautiful day today. We've got some great questions that came in over the last week that I want to grab. And they're awesome questions. Everything from nightmares to biofeedback and the paranormal, all sorts of things. So this morning is going to be really, really fun. Good morning to Brandy. Nice to see you. Good morning, Chris. Good morning, Sally. Nice to see you guys. It is good to see everybody. So today is going to be is a broad range of topics. I've been reading a brilliant book by the amazing Chad Lewis, who's a cryptozoologist and psychologist, and an absolute fascinating book on Wendigo, which ties into one of our questions today. And I've learned an absolute ton of information, which has been good for me with personal ties to that whole thing. So lots to talk about today. I hope you guys did really well this week. There's been, of course, a lot going on out in the world lately. And it's been pretty intense out there. So it's good that we can come back and regroup here and chat and talk, and get into some really interesting nitty-gritty stuff about spirituality and the paranormal and all of that. I love it. I love it. So important. So that being said, we've got, of course, a number of things that are happening this week, including the kids going back to school. And I think and of course, all the parents out there are trying to make the best decision as to whether or not to send their kids back or not. And, governments, especially here in Alberta, there's been sort of stuff that has been dropped on parents last minute, which has been really unfair. There's been a whole bunch of crazy things going on. And I think before we get into the rest of this stuff, I just really wanted to emphasize that I think this is such a great opportunity to be able to teach not only to practice ourselves what alignment is and the power of that alignment, but to also teach it to our kids as well. That our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our state of being is going to dictate what we attract into our experience. And I think this situation with the schools is such a great opportunity to be able to do that, so that the kids can really find their own power in this, because ultimately we're not going to be able to, we can't control a lot of that stuff going on. So just some food for thought. But anyway, there are some great questions that came in that I really wanted to delve into today that I thought were really excellent. And the first one actually came from Dan via email, and I thought this was really interesting because both of these questions had to do with stuff that I've been been looking into over the last little while. And his question is, I'm not sure if anyone has researched this, though a post I've seen prodded the question, is there a known relationship between those who have mastered biofeedback and paranormal experiences? And I thought this was such a great question. It's so unique, and it really ties into some of the research that I've been doing over the last number of months, and in terms of biofeedback and mastering our minds, mastering our brain waves, and things like that. And it's been really intriguing for me to see the correlation between people who can master kind of turning their brain off, changing their brain waves from, delta to theta to alpha, and what people experience and are able to do with that. So one of the things that I've been researching quite heavily over the last number of months has been something that took place in the 70s and 80s with the CIA, called the Gateway Project. So the Gateway Project actually had to do, they coupled with an institute called the Monroe Institute. And the Monroe Institute is still around. It's an amazing organization. It was founded by Bob Monroe, and he basically designed these very in-depth transcendental meditations in regards to pink noise and white noise and all of these different wavelengths, that ultimately, when you were able to calm yourself down and change your brain waves, then you would end up basically having these various experiences and opening yourself up to communication with spirits and things like that. So it's absolutely a fascinating read. The documents were published, or I guess reissued in 2003, because eventually the disclosure statute kind of showed up, and they have to release this stuff after a certain amount of time. And good morning to Amanda, by the way. Amanda from rainy West Yorkshire. Yeah, no kidding. You guys are always in rain. You guys are in rain more than you're not in rain. You guys are like Vancouver. You're in rain all the time. But yeah, so this study for me was very interesting, because it led into a lot of the areas of remote viewing, which later, of course, turned into things like the Stargate Project and whatnot. But the idea that you were able to essentially train by listening, like closing your eyes, listening to these different waves, and honestly what they sound like, you guys can find them on YouTube, you can find them on SoundCloud, places like that. The Monroe Institute has a bunch of guided meditations that are up for free. And but they are basically said to allow you to train your brain to get there on your own. So you actually don't need the headphones and the sound and all of that kind of thing. They're meant as a program and as a process so that you can get there and calm yourself down and whatever without needing those. But what I found really fascinating about this, which I got such a kick out of, is the fact that the people who were doing this, and I've found this myself, is that communication comes a lot easier once you're able to train your brain into these different wavelengths and brain states. It's really interesting. They talk about it in cases of remote viewing and stuff like that as well, with the Gansfeld experiments, where they would have what they call the receiver in a room with ping pong balls over their eyes and the red light around them, that the ping pong balls would diffuse the red light. You guys probably remember the scenes in Ghostbusters and whatnot with the ping pong balls and stuff. And they lay there listening to those waves, right? And as they kind of go into that brain state and whatnot, they are able to receive from somebody that usually called like the viewer. They will be sitting in another room, working on an image or something like that and sending that message. But remote viewing has been used in the military for ages. So yeah, there is a known relationship between the types of things like biofeedback, training the brain into certain areas and things like that, and paranormal. There's a strong and long history with it, and mainly, interestingly enough, in places like the military. You see other bits and pieces of research in ions and things like that, the Institute of Noetic Sciences. But some of the more interesting documents that I found were specifically the Gateway Project. They even get into the idea of what happens after death, all sorts of really intriguing things. They felt like they had figured it out, essentially, which is why this was so groundbreaking. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. You can Google it, like they're on Google. They're publicly available, and it's about 30 pages or so of technical jargon, but if you can get through it, it's absolutely worth it. It's brilliant. So the next question that came, I thought it was via email, and I thought this was profound into another area of study that I've been working on, which is how common is it for an entity to create or influence nightmares? And for the second part of the question, what would they have to gain if that's true? So I thought this was great. Really good question. And of course, there's been a lot of talk about that, a lot of discussion as to whether or not this is something that is these entities have influence over our dreams, whether they visit us in our dreams, and whether they specifically influence things like nightmares. Now, depending on what culture you go to, this is absolutely the case. Now, the one that I've been in the depths of research with over the last little while has been the Wendigo, and which is an Algonquian cultural phenomenon that has branched into the Métis and the Cree and Blackfoot and all the different First Nations cultures. And in the Wendigo legends, as well as a number of other First Nations lore, the Wendigo is very much an influencer of dreams. It will visit you in the dreams, and often what will happen is that people will report in the dream having something come to them in some form or another with meat that looks really, really good, and they're offered this meat and they're told maybe it's beaver or it's something else, and they eat it only to find out that it's human flesh. So and it's said to be one of the first stages of the Wendigo possession. So for those of you guys who are not familiar with the concept of Wendigo, it's basically this monster that's kind of got 1 foot into physical reality and 1 foot out, and the 1 foot and sort of one in the spiritual, one in the physical, and comes on the breath of cold and famine and abuse and loneliness and all of these things, and it's manifested from that. And it's almost a bit like a zombie, where it's looking for human food. But if you see one, you can also become Wendigo as well. You can transform into one. So depending on which sort of stage of its life cycle you want to look at, these things are kind of roaming the winter woods and things like that. And if you see one, then you're being hunted and you're in trouble. So in the Wendigo legend, one of the first stages of this process is this thing showing up in dreams. And when we look at some of the cases over the years, including that of probably one of the more famous ones, which was Swift Runner here in Alberta, once they had arrested him for eating and killing his entire family just outside of Egg Lake here in southern Alberta, they basically were reporting that he was screaming and yelling in the prison, as well as in the mission where he was staying, that something was coming in his window and attacking him. And of course, nobody saw this; everybody just heard him screaming. So there was a really long history of this creature sort of belaboring people in dreams and possession and things like that. So is the research there to support that? For example, yes, this is coming. These things are creating nightmares and stuff like that. We can't prove that. We don't know. There's been more research in the angle of dreams when it comes to premonitions and precognition and stuff like that. There's been a lot more research in that arena. Rather than whether or not this is actually an act like a physical visitation or a spiritual visitation. But you ask the people who have been involved in it and who have had it happen, and yeah, absolutely, this has hands down become a thing. This has become a very much a cultural staple and a truth, in their lives. So, and I think all of us at some point have had a dream or an encounter, in that, whether it be in the dream state or whether it be in the hypnopompic or hypnagogic states coming in or out of sleep, where, we've had an encounter that seemed a lot more like an actual engagement rather than something where our imagination is trying to process day-to-day information. And I find that seems to be what the difference is for me, in regards to these different dream states, is that when you're having a dream, it's your brain kind of trying to process daily information that maybe you've jammed away, where with some of these visitations, they feel a little bit more like you've had an encounter, if that makes any sense. You've had an interaction with somebody, and oftentimes those can be very, very, very meaningful. So in the case of things like the Wendigo, like many of the First Nations speak of, that's really what they are describing, is that there's some sort of an encounter that's happening, and it's really intriguing to me. The factual evidence that has come out in and around sort of these dreamlike concepts, these beasts that seem to emerge from thought, ties in very strongly actually to the Gateway Project. When you get into the last few pages of those documents, they talk about the idea that as these people who were experimenting with these brainwaves were going under, they were having encounters with what they called thought forms. So they were avidly communicating back and forth with, they didn't use the word spirit, I think they used the word entity, but they realized that they were speaking with these different intelligences while they were in this state of complete relaxation and in these different brainwaves. And they felt as well that this was actually something that was solid and concrete and factual. They were not turning around and saying, we had a dream about it, but they were actually pulling specific information from these entities that they were conversing with. It was really fascinating. So I highly recommend you read these, because it really does tie into, as I say, the idea of nightmares and things like that. So many of my clients over the years, of course, nightmares and things like that are often a big thing with kids and whatnot. And I get a lot of adults as well that message in asking, how do we manage, these nightmares that seemingly we can't control? What do we do about that, when we're sleeping and whatnot? So here's what I've found. And I found this to be very, very powerful, very prolific. And that is, when the state in which we go to sleep is often the state in which we dream, and it's often the state in which we wake up. So if we go to sleep in this really negative, upset state, then as we move along, and through our sleep cycle, we tend to stay in that. Unfortunately, we stay at that attraction point. We kind of just, if we start out falling asleep in a negative light, the odds of us having these nightmares are usually pretty high. Kids are a great example of this. If kids go to bed, if they've had nightmares prior, they go to bed in a state of anxiety or whatnot, then oftentimes their nights will be full of a state of anxiety as well. Their dreams will start to reflect that within and of itself. So again, this comes back to, what are we doing before we go to bed? How are we being in the world, right? So that's one of the things that I'm always encouraging clients that have kids that are dealing with nightmares and stuff like that, is that how can you create a ritual? And maybe this is something for you as well. How can you create your own ritual to get yourself into that state of mind before you actually get into bed? Shadow saying, when nightmares have been really bad and frequent, I've surrounded my bed with a circle of salt and found that to be helpful, and burned sage before sleeping. Yeah, there's a great example of a ritual that you can do before you get to sleep. It's whatever is going to get you into that state of mind, to make you feel better, to make you feel more confident. So I highly recommend, something before bed. I find meditation is really, really helpful because it starts to turn off that negative momentum that you've got going. So once you can turn that off, you can end up, getting yourself into a better state of being just that way. But lots of people do various different things, including, just sitting and painting or reading. But if you are reading, I highly recommend to be careful about what you're reading, because what you're reading can make a big difference as well, right? So what we're feeding our brains is always a trick. I do a lot of creative writing before bed. I find that is really helpful. I'm usually writing one thing or another, and I find that is really helpful and fun and whatnot too. So that's always something to keep in mind as well. But whatever it is that works for you, but find yourself, and that's your to-do, is find yourself and create some sort of a ritual that will bring you centered, and see sleep as an action. Sleep is an action. Shadow saying, the nightmares have always been worse when my life is in chaos, and meditation is great. Yeah, and it's funny because our dreams and our brain, we really do process this stuff when we're sleeping. We don't realize how much of the outside world that we are actually perceiving, but we're not actually, we're not chomping through those bits of information consciously. So I think the more that we can turn that off, and be able to just relax, be able to let some of that stuff go before we get into that dream state, the better it is. The other aspect of it is that you can kind of have some fun with it too, right? We can kind of have fun with that as well, where if we've got, we know that we're able to, to focus our dreams. I know some people really lucid dream. I don't lucid dream, but I know there's just a number of people out there who are really, really big into being able to actually lucid dream consciously, which I think is phenomenal. But it's not always. Sally's saying, I get bad anxiety at night. I'm not religious, but ever since I started praying to her guardian angel, I've been able to sleep. Yeah, there's a great example of it, that prayer and that surrender, that turning your worries, turning that fear over to something else, I think is brilliant. And surrender really is such a key to so many spiritual practices, and it really is. I think key to moving through the world just in a general basis. People mistake things like surrender and whatnot for laziness. They think, oh, if you're not acting, then you're being lazy. And that's not true at all. Brandy's asking, what's lucid dreaming? So lucid dreaming is really fascinating. Some people have the ability to actually have a dream and be completely awake and conscious and in control of it. So, and this has always fascinated me because this has never been the case for me. Like, I've never had this, but they will have a dream and they are consciously acting. So instead of either seeing a scenario played out or kind of being forced to be a part of the scenario, they can make decisions. They can choose what they're saying. They can, even sometimes choose what the other people are doing and saying. But it's just complete conscious control of the dream itself. And, it's something like places like the Monroe Institute and whatnot have played around with. But it's really, really, really interesting. I don't think I've ever had a lucid dream. But it's literally what it says it is. It's just people are lucid in that dream state. It's wild. It's just wild. So anyway, I've got a great segment, you guys, from Faith in the Valley to read to you today. It's really, really good. I think it's really profound. And I want to be able to read to you guys some of that because we didn't get to do it last week. Brandy says she thinks she can do it naturally. Is it normal? Yeah. Like, there's the people that can do it just off the cuff. It's like no big deal to them at all. And Shadow's saying that she finds it easy to control her dreams when they're about flying because she loves flying. That's phenomenal. You know, I think that kind of dream is incredible. And what an experience. You know, it's almost like being non-physical. It's really, really, really cool. Mark is asking, does the spirit leave the body when you sleep? And that's a really interesting thing too. So a lot of the Gateway Project that I was talking about actually focused around out-of-body experiences. So that Gateway Project in and of itself, a lot of it had to do with these experiences of people just relaxing enough that they felt like their spirit, their soul, their non-physical part actually got up and wandered around the space that they were in, which I think actually has a lot to do with many apparitions. You know, we hear about crisis apparitions, for instance, that show up, you know, just before a person dies or something like that, and it's that individual. And it seems that the death process can initiate that as well, which makes sense. But yeah, does it leave the body when you sleep? I don't think it does all the time, but I think it sure can. And as I say, Gateway Project is probably the number one point for that. Lori's saying, I've periodically been able to change the direction of a dream or tell myself to wake up if I don't like it. Yeah, I've had that as well. I've had that too, where I've actually had... periodically I've been able to kind of go, oh, wait a minute, this isn't right, and wake myself up out of it. But it's never been consistent, though. It's never been consistent. Shadow's wondering what my thoughts were regarding out-of-body experiences and the cord cutting. Cord cutting is so interesting, because I think it's a process for a number of people that I know that it has served them very well, and I think it's an amazing visual tactic to be able to release and let go of somebody, just somebody that's toxic, somebody that, you know, whatever that situation is. And what's fascinating about this, and I'll explain the process as well, so that those of you who don't know what cord cutting is, we can kind of get into it a bit. So the idea of cord cutting is the thought that we can visualize a tie between ourselves and another person in the form of some sort of cord. And the cord looks different for everybody and possibly every relationship that you have, these long cords. And so as these long cords are you know, tying everybody together, and we all have these different ties, the idea is to visualize that cord either breaking or cutting or being destroyed in some way, so that you are no longer spiritually or emotionally invested in that person and in that relationship. And the theory is that if the relationship or whatnot is meant to happen or whatnot, that cord will grow back in a healthier way once you've released the negative one. So that's the idea behind cord cutting. I think it's a really helpful visualization process for people to let this stuff go. And what's interesting is that the other person, at least in situations that I've both heard about through friends as well as read about, is that the other party on some level seems to be aware of it. I have a friend who she did that with her parents. And her parents like never phone her, they never talked to her, just like they just checked right out for years. And she did this visualization process where she cut the cord, and the next thing you know, her parents like phoning her like all the time, like a lot right after this process. Within, you know, a few hours of this, her doing this visualization, the phone rang. And it happened over and over and over again. And of course, they were not conscious of this process. So it's really, really wild. It's a really interesting topic. Yeah, Brandy's saying, I think it should be a carryover topic. I think it should be too. I think this is going to be next week as well. Cause it's so intricate. It's so intricate how this stuff works. It's really wild. And, you know, maybe that has to do with, you know, when you look at, you know, particle physics, how if you've got one particle on one side of the world, you can have its matching particle on the other side. And if you move the one on this side, the other one will respond. You know, maybe it's something to do with that, but I find it absolutely intriguing, and it seems like on some level both parties are involved. So it's really, really interesting stuff. So I want to read you guys a little bit of this today because it's super interesting, from Faith in the Valley, and I think it brings up some really good points, especially going into, as I say, our school week here, because, as I say, nobody knows exactly how the hell this is going to go for all of these different classes and you know, parents that are worried and all sorts of things like that. All right, so check this out. How can you tell when you are being called upon to be patient and when you are being called upon to take action? There will be those situations when you will be absolutely torn and very confused about what to do. You should be patient, seemingly. Should you be patient, seemingly passive, or should you defend your rights, your space, or yourself? Your heart may say that you are being tested while your ego is screaming, "You can't do this to me." How can you determine what is the right thing to do? I've discovered that you don't know until you get still. In all situations, you must stop before you move. Not until you stop, look, and listen will you receive divine guidance. Stop worrying. Stop blaming. Stop being angry and outraged. Look at the situation from all angles and sides. Look for your lesson and your share of responsibility. Then you must turn within and listen for the guidance of spirit. Your lesson is to be still or patient. If your lesson is to be still or patient, miraculously you will find the strength to let go and know that God's way is the perfect way. If its source's will that you should act or speak, something inside your being will stand up, move your feet, and point you in the right direction. When you are patient enough to stop, look, and listen, asking what to do, you will always be shown how to do it. And I've found this to be really true, in the sense that, and not necessarily in a religious context, but just in the context that, when you're able to get still, we're able to kind of quiet our mind enough to shut up, sit down, and pay attention. The way is there. And oftentimes problems can be very complicated, but solutions are very simple. And usually finding that simple side of the solution is really what's important. Problems are complicated. Solutions are usually pretty simple. Very interesting. So anyway, you guys, have an amazing Wednesday. I thought, considering, everything that's going on this week, we'll go back to our health affirmations for today. And I'll just let everybody who's moving back into the working world of school and things like that, just to have our inner peace with us and know how to get there no matter what the situation is. So everybody take a breath. It is natural for my body to be well. Even if I don't know what to do in order to get better, my body does. I have trillions of cells with individual consciousness, and they know how to achieve individual balance. When this condition began, I didn't know what I know now. I don't need to understand the cause of this illness. I only have to gently, eventually release this illness. It doesn't matter how it got started, because it's reversing its course right now. And there's no hurry about any of this. My body knows what to do. Well-being is natural to me. My inner being is intricately aware of my physical body. My cells are asking for what they need in order to thrive, and Source is answering those requests. I'm in very good hands. My only work is to relax and breathe, and I can do that easily. Everybody take a breath. So next week we're going to continue this conversation because it's really fascinating. Really, really fascinating. So much to talk about, so much to go through. And I love it. I love it. So I hope you guys have an amazing week. Go into it, find your balance, and find your bedtime ritual, whatever it is for you, before you go to sleep, and be able to wake up, because the way we go to sleep is the way we tend to wake up in the morning. So whatever energy we carry in, we also wake up with. So have an amazing week, everybody, and I will talk to you all next Wednesday. Spiritual Healthcare, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Bye, guys.